Parent Chat is brought to you by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. LWSF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising funds and amplifying community resources to ensure that every student in the Lake Washington School District has what they need to thrive, both now and in the future. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation collaborates closely with the school district to invest in and implement essential programs that remove barriers, support wellness, enhance learning, and build connections for all students. From weekend food packs for students in need to inclusive library grants to programs like Parent Chat, the Foundation's work ensures that every child has the opportunity to succeed. We offer a variety of programs and initiatives to support our mission. Here's a quick glance at some of them. You can learn more about the Foundation's work at www.lwsf.org. We encourage you to stay connected with us by subscribing to our e-newsletter to hear about upcoming events, stories of impact, and opportunities to make a difference. You can make a contribution online, and you can follow us on social media. Together, we can create a nurturing and dynamic learning environment where our children can reach their fullest potential. Welcome everyone. We'll be starting really soon, about 20 seconds. Hello, good evening. I'm so glad you're here. Let me see if I can get this off. There we go. I'm so glad you're here for the very first Parent Chat of this season. For those of you who are new to the Parent Chats, my name is Coach Sherry, or Sherry Gazid. I am the founder of TeenWise, but I facilitate this Parent Chat program because it is so wonderful and so amazing to be able to connect with the parents in our community and to really know that we're making a difference. When I say we, me and all of you who are joining us, just making a difference in the community and for our kids. Tonight, we're starting off the season with a topic that I'm hearing a lot from parents, that they are seeing their kids are lowly or don't have a lot of motivation. Let me put it that way. And so how do we instill that love of learning in our kids? And we have Jessyka Coulter here to share with us. So let me tell you who she is, and then we'll invite her. Or there you go. She's on screen now. Let me just read her bio for you so you know who's coming to you tonight. And she's got some great information for us. So Jessyka Coulter is the CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring. Her company offers study and executive functioning skills tutoring through her Love to Learn program. And I just love the title of that. It's not just like be successful, although that's part of it, right? But Love to Learn. She knows most curriculums are designed with one particular student in mind that doesn't meet every student's personal learning needs. When tweens, teens, and young adults don't know how to learn, they don't enjoy school or learning. And don't worry, if you have younger kids, this is also going to be applicable to you. When students discover how to learn through the 12 study skills that Jessyka teaches, they begin to love to learn again. This makes school so much better for them and for you, the parents, right? Learning never stops, but it can be tough to start without the right skills. While study skills are the most important part of Jessyka's work and makes the most difference to teens long term, she also provides, oh, sorry, I messed that up. Let me do that again. It can be tough to while study skills are the most important part of Jessyka's work and make the most difference to teens long term, she also offers private one-to-one academic tutoring online for the ACT, the SAT, proofreading, and tutors all core middle school subjects. That's a lot, Jessyka. That's impressive. So ask her about our lesson bundles that include content tutoring and her Love to Learn study skills program. Welcome, Jessyka, to our Parent Chat.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is super exciting. So thank you, Sherry, and thank you for the whole foundation. This is amazing. The more I learn about it, I'm like, wow, I've never heard of such an awesome foundation. So I'm like, you guys are lucky.
Yeah, it's very cool what we do and through this parent chat, to be able to bring people like you and thank you for volunteering your time. I really appreciate it. I do want to say before we jump into your content, Jessica, for the parents who are here tonight, feel free to ask questions. There's a Q&A box. Throw them in there so they don't get lost. And in the chat box, if you have comments or anything, throw them in there. We're going to be asking you questions too as we go, so you'll put those in the comment section and I'll monitor that for you, Jessica, so you don't have to keep an eye on that.
Appreciate it. All right, are we ready to get started?
Yes, let's share your slides.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be super, super fun, Sherry. So thank you so very much. All right. Well, moms, dads, guardians, thank you all so much for joining us. We are here to talk about this love of learning. We are here to really help you and your teens, your tweens have an awesome school year. I do generally work with the older kiddos, but like Sherry said, everything we're talking about today is going to apply to you, to your family, no matter if you've got kiddos in elementary or high school or anywhere in between. So I know you all just started school not too long ago. I think if I remember right, you guys started what, like last week, maybe 2 weeks ago,
Yes, a couple of weeks under the belt. That's it.
which is so unusual to me being here in the Midwest because we start clear back in what, like mid to early like August. And so it's like
Yeah.
we've been in school for like a month already. But I'd love to ask all of our parents that are here, so kind of get everybody used to, you said the Q&A box. I want to know, if I asked you how you want your teen to feel the school year, how we want your children to feel going into the school year. Do you want them to be eager or do you want them to be overwhelmed? Because I feel like every single person here would choose eager, but I'd love to hear from you all. See if you're here because you want your children to be excited to learn. You want them to feel like they know exactly how to study, they know how to do homework, they feel like it is easy. So I'll let
Yeah,
you go.
and I'll say, I work with teens one to one and I ask them kind of how they're feeling. And I'm already this is the second week and I'm already hearing overwhelmed.
Mm,
Already hearing that. So
exactly. Yes. So I don't know if we've got talkative parents here with us or not. Sherry, I haven't seen answers come through yet. So I'll keep
yeah.
us going here. And oh, there we go. All right. So we are talking study skills today. And I know, mamas, you might be going, Jessica, I thought I was here to talk about a level of learning. And that is what I want to address. I want to talk about the connection between knowing how to learn and loving to learn. Because if you've got a kiddo that is overwhelmed, you have a child that is not at all motivated, there was a lot of procrastination that happened last year. It all boils down to these three signs, these basically three thoughts that your children have when it comes to learning. Now, if I back it up here, just to make sure it's completely clear, we get our foundations in place. Do you know your teens who know how to study can learn anything? All right. One of the most important things that I do as a study skills tutor is help children learn how to learn so they can learn whenever, whatever. It doesn't matter if we're talking, a new hobby, if it's something in the classroom, if you and your children are trying to do something together for the first time, your kids have to know how to learn in order to be successful at whatever that thing is. Now, I know I've used that word studying, I've used that word learning, and so you're like, Jessica, this is a lot of words you're throwing at me. Do know studying is the process of learning. So in order for your children to know how to learn, to actually then enjoy learning, they have to know how to study. So one of my most important things that I do as a tutor is I teach kids how to learn so they can enjoy it, which then means you get to enjoy being a parent again. Right? Part of what we won't really get to talk about today are the benefits to you directly as a parent. But do know when you don't have to be sitting next to your teen for hours every night helping with homework, you don't have to constantly be reminding, hey, are you ready for that test? Hey, did you turn this assignment in? Your teacher says you're not doing so well. You don't have to worry about those things when your children learn how to learn. Okay, I have this amazing resource that will be providing you with the link at the end, my homework buster. It's 5 tips to bust through those homework objections. I'll be providing that at the end as a thank you for being here. And I know
One
she,
thing
oh, go,
before
sorry.
you do this slide, I just have to say I'm super excited about this concept of not just teaching them the math that they're currently working on, but going back before that, even how do you learn and study no matter what it is? I mean, that is so key because that then is going to, like, whatever they're trying to learn when they get to college, if they go to college or whatever subject they're in, versus just teaching them math is just teaching them that one skill. So I love that. Thank you.
Oh, and that's a good point, Sherry. I mean, that's exactly why I do what I do. Is I did start as a content tutor, because when you think of tutor, most people think of, okay, my kid needs help with this class, needs help with this paper, this assignment, and that is so important, the content. But I got to tell you, after years of working with students, helping them with those specific classes, I realized that was really short term. Like I was gonna see the same kid for the same problem, maybe next semester, maybe 2 years later, if they weren't showing up with notes. They didn't know when the next test was. They didn't even know why they were learning what they were learning. And so I then decided, okay, they need something more long-term, those study skills. Now, I will be 100% honest with everybody here, and I will tell you I'm a nerd. All right, like 100%. I love to learn. I've loved to learn forever. It started probably when I was a little kid because so many of my family members are educators. And also clear back in 4th grade, I decided I want to be valedictorian, which I know sounds kind of crazy. Why is an elementary student thinking about that? But yet it guided every decision I made in middle school and high school and even beyond. But I will say though, when I say that, a lot of people are like, okay, she's a little crazy because she's thinking about straight A's that early. And then also school must have been easy because how can someone get straight A's that long? But I will tell you, the study skills that I teach, they're skills that I use, have taught hundreds of teens, and also are the benefit of me because I didn't just get it. Like when I work with kids, I don't know, Sherry, how many students you work with that just seemed like get it naturally without trying. For me, I get a little jealous, okay? Because I was a kid that would study for like hours until I just got it because like I just needed to believe that I could do it. And yet everything I do, no matter if I'm working with an adult and going for his master's thesis, if I'm working with a 7th grader trying to get through an English class, it always comes down to knowing these study skills, everything. So I could share hundreds of stories, but if I gave you just 3, I would tell you about Jenny, who had a son who was just sure he was never going to be good at math because he just thought he couldn't, but it was just literally his confidence. Aisha had a really strong-willed daughter. So if any of our listeners, any of our parents here are like, yeah, my kid and I are fighting because she's really stubborn, Aisha completely understands. And Stephanie had a daughter also struggling with math, but an added complication of ADHD. So if any of our parents here have kiddos neurodivergent or typical, no matter where in between, these study skills, these 3 things we're going to talk about do apply, no matter the type of teen, type of student. All right. And I do kind of like to just, open the doors. I don't know, Sherry, if I should say this or not, but I would tell you that this is the perfect parent chat, the perfect webinar for you if you know your teens, your children could be learning more. If you know procrastination, lack of focus is a problem, I encourage you to stick with us for the full hour. And also if homework, all right, like I know we're only a couple weeks in, but if homework is already a problem, you're already dreading it, we are going to give you solutions to help with that. All right. Opposite side though, again, ready to hop off whatever you'd like, but I just want you to know that if like technology, video games, way more important, probably can't help you too much tonight. Also, as amazing as the teachers are in like Washington, let alone anywhere in the world, they just cannot literally teach your kids study skills. Like they just do not have the time. So if you're sure your kids are going to just figure it out someday, up to you if you want to stick with us. And then at the end, we give you a little bit more information about me, how you can work with me. If you're not interested, no harm, no foul. But I know I'm ready to keep going, and I hope, mamas, you are here ready to listen, to learn. I hope that as more parents join us, you are using that chat, using that Q&A, because I'll do my best to make this as interactive as possible. So are we all here, all ready to help your teens, your children love to learn? I'd love to see some yeses. Maybe, I don't know if we can do some interactions, if we can do, the reactions, maybe that's the word I meant to
Yeah,
say.
use the reactions. I love to see those. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you should have Zoom changes it all the time. Right now, apparently it's a heart. If you look at it, there we go. There's a thumbs
Yay.
up. Thank
Awesome.
you.
I
It's
love
like
it.
that. Thank you. I mean, when you do that, to those of you who are here with us, it gives us some dopamine rush. So, we love those reactions. Feel free to keep those coming. Thank you. Thank
So I like to make sure everybody's still awake because
you.
I know you guys,
Yes.
it's only 7 o'clock for us. It's 9 o'clock. So I'm like, all right, I'm still here. I got this.
Yes.
All right. So I know I've kind of teased it a little bit, but I wanted to make sure we knew exactly where we were going tonight, making sure we know the connection between love to learn, how to learn, and study skills. Because what I want to share with you all, and this is why it doesn't matter if you've got elementary, middle school, or high school students, that there are 3 thoughts that your children have that let you know, okay, there's a problem here. There is a reason my child doesn't love to learn because he or she is missing study skills. It starts with your child thinking, this is boring. Like, I have no motivation to learn this. It also happens when your child is distracted, not able to focus. And finally, that last sign is when your kid's like, hey, I don't have to study. Like, I just don't need to do this. Like, I don't need to know this. So that is what we're going to dive into, each of these 3 signs. So I'd love to start with number 1, studying is boring. So do we have any parents in the house? And maybe share, I don't know if this is you or your own students, but I wonder, have we heard this from our kids? Studying is boring. If you guys want to say yes.
While people are answering that, I'd love to hear if that's your kids in the chat box. And I will say that I've been talking a lot to my clients about this because I have a lot of creatives that I work with, and I'm like, get your colored markers out, doodle your stuff, like make it fun. It doesn't have to be boring. I'm a little bit of a nerd as well, Jessica, but it can be fun. But anyway, so
Definitely. And I gotta
Eric,
tell you, as soon as you talk about the colors, I go, okay, that's a visual learner thing there, Sherry.
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Oh,
Erica
man.
says definitely she is experiencing this from her 9-year-old son.
Mm,
So you're here at the right time, Erica, because if you can get him at 9 years old, he's got a lot more studying in his future.
exactly. Yes, there'll be a lot happier times this school year, let alone, yes, everyone going forward. Yes. So I would tell you, Erica, and everyone else here, that if you ever hear this class is boring, school is boring, studying is boring, like any of that, that's all symptomatic of letting you know your teen is not motivated to learn for the sake of learning. And especially with a lot of new teachers, especially if you've got kiddos that are repeating teachers, let alone a brand new teacher, and your kid's like, I wish I had this math teacher, or this teacher is so mean, or the teacher doesn't like me. All of those are just letting you know your teen doesn't enjoy learning. Okay. And especially if you've got older students, if you got any parents of high schoolers here, and your kid's taking a class that he just has to graduate, but he doesn't really want to take that class, that lack of interest, big old red flag that study skills are missing. Okay. Now, the thing that a lot of parents don't realize is when your children say school is boring or I don't want to learn this, it's almost always a cover up. Okay. Instead of coming to you parents, instead of admitting to the teacher, and definitely, especially for those of you that have tweens or teens, your kids don't want their friends to think of them as the dumb ones. All right. Like our kids would rather just say, don't care, don't know, don't want to know, and just kind of shrug it off instead of actually say help. Okay. So that's one of those things that really goes on that we don't always realize is the truth. Now, with each of these signs, I want to avoid some kind of bigger snowball effects. There are things that I don't want to happen down the road just because your teen doesn't love to learn because he doesn't know how to learn. When we're talking about this lack of motivation, your child is probably going to fail some classes. All right. Like if he doesn't show up, like skips classes in high school, let alone, doesn't even really want to attempt, especially like if we're talking the younger kids and we're starting out this basis of, okay, are you actually going to try? Or is it going to stay not wanting to try for many, many years, many, many classes? Okay. And eventually, when you got kids in college, you're paying for each credit hour. That adds up fast. If any of you have kids both still in school and out of high school. And for me, as a nerd, as a tutor, I want your children to become lifelong learners. All right. And for each of you as parents, I want you to think about what's going to happen for your grandchildren someday, or the children your children might someday work with or even just influence. If your child doesn't love to learn, how can he or she help someone else love to learn if your child doesn't value education now? Okay. Now, the awesome thing is about each of these signs, each of these things that might currently be happening, is we can do something about it. All right. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. For this, when it comes to motivation, getting your teen to not think learning is boring, is we got to find that motivation. All right. And this could be like Sherry was saying, the colors, like the fun pens. Like one of the things I love to do as a study skills tutor is I match these 12 study skills I'll tell you about in a little bit to that learning style, to that particular student I'm working with, to what they actually enjoy. For one of my past students, it was all about basketball. He was a very kinesthetic learner. We went out on the basketball court and we actually had his homework, and he got to dribble so many times for how many ever minutes, or you got a problem right, you got to shoot from this line versus that line. That was his motivation. Not only getting to play basketball, but then to learn while we were playing.
Oh, and I love that because you're anchoring something that gives him a positive feeling, dopamine response with that math, but also just with learning. So it's that goes way beyond just learning something. That's like really creating that emotional, positive feeling connection. Love it.
Exactly. And the cool thing is he obviously can't play basketball in class, right? But the thing is when he's studying on his own at home, there's no one that says you can't grab the basketball and go outside as long as you're studying.
Yep.
Exactly. All right. So the second thing that I know happens that causes that kind of break of the love of learning, kind of prevents it even from happening, are distractions. So parents that are here, I think of things I know that distract me, let alone the things that distract the teens, even in my one-on-one sessions. I'd love to know if your teens are distracted, if there are things that you see your child doing instead of homework. And let's see here, Sherry. I saw another question about in-person or virtual. Everything that I do is virtual, because even when I worked with students in person, even local families, they all preferred virtual. But all right, so I don't know if anyone has things they want to share. I gotta tell you, Sherry, it's a little different not to get to see people's names. I'm used to getting a call on people in my
I
webinar.
know, I know.
A little different.
Yeah, and I would call on people, except I know sometimes people are like making dinner out there, so I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but definitely feel like you can jump in and ask questions or say stuff here. Eric is saying yes, nearly a daily challenge.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Here, yeah.
Yes. So what I would tell you, there are the things kind of I was expecting to hear, things, like electronics. I pretty much hear that from everybody anymore. And then the things that aren't so obvious here is I got to tell you that dedicated study space. Actually, I'm doing a training this week with some teens. We're talking about the perfect study session. And the thing I really, really want to encourage each of you, and then I'm encouraging them, is there has to be one place in the house that your child knows this is the homework place. This is the place I do everything for school. Because if your child doesn't have that dedicated homework space, that study space, he's gonna be distracted. Okay. And then, we've mentioned a little bit about learning styles. There's the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic. We can talk more about that during Q&A if you'd like. But just know, like, I'm very, very visual. So I love my colors. This highlighter, can be super distracting to a kid who's not visual. My kinesthetic kiddos, they're going to be the ones drawing on themselves versus using the highlighter for what they actually need to use it for, because that's not how they learn. Okay. Other things that aren't so tangible, but yet still can distract our kids are peer pressure and FOMO, the fear of missing out. In this day and age, our kids don't want to be too smart. They don't want to be too dumb, right? They just want to fit in. I got to tell you, as a teacher's pet, I got treated a little differently, right? Like everybody knew, oh, that's Jessyka. She's going to do this because it's her, right? She cares about this. She's going to do this. But then also our kids get picked on, like bullying is a real thing if they're the kid that seems to always be behind, to always, give the wrong answers in class. And especially with the different school schedules, like I'm thinking with you all starting a little bit later than we did. If your kids have friends or family members, different states, different school districts, even your child's sitting there doing his homework, gets a text, hey, or hanging out, or she gets, a message, let's go do this. Your child wants to do that fun thing, doesn't want to do the have to study, the have to school thing. And that is a distraction right there. Okay. Now, what's really going on here? Like why our teens get so distracted, our kids get so distracted? Well, there's this thing called multitasking. All right. I think every one of us here is probably guilty of this, that we think we can do it. Like Sherry, you mentioned making dinner, listening to this webinar.
Mhm.
Well, unfortunately, the science says we don't multitask. We can task switch, but we cannot multitask. And so our kids, unfortunately, having access to so many devices, so much homework being online now too, our kids might have several tabs open. They might have their console nearby. They might have their phone nearby. They might be talking to a sibling. They might be, at this place that's more fun than their homework space. And so they focus on this for a couple minutes and then that for a couple minutes. And it just takes forever because they're not truly focused on any one thing.
And
And
let me ask you a question about this,
yeah.
because I know for myself, and a lot of my clients talk about this, is having on like music on while they're studying. So, in particular, lo-fi seems to be a really good choice. What are your thoughts on that?
So my general rule of thumb with music is it's a no-go. And that is simply for the fact of you want to always study in the testing environment. And since there's no music allowed 99% of the time when you take a test, or you're basically expected to like present the material or like show your understanding, you've got to study in the same way that you then, kind of show your expertise. And so
Jessica, that's killing me. I gotta
mhm.
think about that one.
It's one of those things. I mean, in this day and age, I mean, I'm old enough that we didn't really have, phones. Like it was still kind of a really new thing. But I'm old enough that we were just starting to get MP3 players and iPods, and so kids were learning, hey, I can record like the test answers, or the study guide, and then if they let me listen to it during the test, that I have the answers. So that's part of it too. Is a lot of times you're just not allowed to because there's just so many ways to cheat on a test.
Right, right. Okay.
So I kind of expect you to take us a totally different direction there, Sherry, because with the phones, like if they're in the room, they're a distraction. Like there's so many awesome like
Okay.
different apps that let you like not get notifications. But I gotta tell you, our kids, like if it's next to them, they're like, I gotta check. Like it doesn't matter if they know it's off. There's just literally muscle memory, like they're attached. Like they're like, I'm gonna check like every 5 seconds, even if everybody knows I can't be talked to right now. So
Yeah.
that's a
There
whole
is
thing.
that muscle memory. There was one
And I
day
see
where I
there
had
were
it,
siblings.
sorry, I had it
Go
close
ahead.
by, and I kept picking it up. I'm like, why am I picking it up? I'm not looking at anything. Like I'm not scrolling. I just kept picking it up. And for kids who are listening to music or whatever they're doing, if that phone's there, it's just too much of a distraction, At the very least, put it across the room. Even that's not great, but yeah.
Well, one
Um,
of the things that I did with one of my students when I worked in the classroom is she was really, really short, and we had this really tall cabinet. And so we would put her phone at the top of the cabinet. And so she learned, okay, I can walk over to the cabinet, but I can't get to it until, Jessica will reach up there and get it for me. And so we learned, okay, how many problems do you have to answer before Jessica will go to the top of the cabinet for you? And that was her motivation of, I got to get this many done, so she'll walk over there for me.
nice. Yeah.
So that's a whole thing. But with distractions, not to scare anybody, the thing I like to point out is we're talking a lot about phones here. We're talking a lot about devices. For any of you that have kiddos that are older, they're going to eventually be behind the wheel of a car. If they're sitting there at home doing homework, can't stay off their phones for the 15 minutes to get through, say, that English assignment. Now we're going to put them behind the wheel of a car as they're driving to school. Are they going to be distraction free? Probably not, because they're so used to always checking their phones. And I
Mhm.
mentioned failing classes when we have motivation issues. The next kind of step for that, again, when we're thinking our older students, is we got to worry about GPA. Okay, for any of our middle school parents here, unfortunately, grades, they do matter in middle school, but not for the same reason as they do at the high school and college levels. So as soon as your child takes the class, that GPA has been impacted, good or bad. And there's really no going back, depending on the school district rules, depending on how transcripts work in that part of the world. Okay. And one of the study skills that I do teach is time management. There is so many connections, so much connected between time management and distractions and focus. Because if your children can stay focused, that assignment won't take very long. But if they're constantly stopping and starting and they're constantly doing this and then they're doing that, and then they keep like procrastinating, that's a whole big connection here too. That assignment is going to take way longer than it needs to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, my clients will admit when we talk about homework, if they've got it under control, they'll say, well, it takes me 3 hours to do something that should take me 1 hour because of my phone. I mean, they'll admit it. So it's definitely a thing.
And so that seriously goes back to the right study environment. And that is 100% dependent on a child's learning style, let alone their interest. because I got to tell you, I had a student I worked with as a para when I was in the special education classroom. He hated to go to school, like, and he even hated to go to class. So we eventually got him to school, got him to the special education classroom, but he refused to go to his classes. He would sit on his phone, or on his computer really, in the corner playing games all day. Literally, I sat on the floor for weeks, kind of invaded his bubble. And then he's like, Miss Coulter must want something. Got him off the computer games, and we got through all of his classwork like in 2 hours. And then he realized, oh, well, now that I'm done with my school stuff that I have to do, now I get to do what I want to do. So that is part of the goal with teaching teens study skills, is so they learn, okay, I'm doing this because I want to now, I know how to, and when I do what I have to do, I get to do what I want to do a lot faster.
Yeah. And again, we're saying teens, but if you can start this at a young age, teaching them this concept, then it's going to stick with them, which is great.
Exactly. I'm so in that teen mindset, Sherry, and it's honestly because I've had a lot of parents ask me, would you work with younger children? And so I've gone down to 6th grade, and I've learned that some middle schools, it's 5th through 8th. That's what it was where I was in Kansas for a long time. And I gotta tell you, 5th grade though, it's still so much elementary. And it's
Yeah.
one of those things like up to 4th grade, we're learning how to read. And then there's that transition right between 4th and 5th grade of reading to learn. And it's like until we really get that part kind of solidified, we can't start adding on all these executive functioning skills, all these study skills. It's too much. So the final thing I'd like to talk about today, the kind of the last thing that our children are thinking that let us know, okay, skills are missing, comes down to our children thinking, studying, learning even is unnecessary. So I think of this as, I don't need to know this. I think of this as, when am I ever going to use this? So I'm hoping parents, if you're hearing these things, you're going to let us know, does that sound familiar? Because going back to devices, we can look up so much stuff so easily. And I imagine some of you too have older kiddos that are, again, thinking about graduation requirements and going, this teacher's so easy, right? For those of you that have multiple children, you might have had an older child say, yeah, you want this teacher, not this one, or this teacher, doesn't let anybody fail, or especially at the beginning of the school year, I want you all to really be aware of what the late work policies are and the test retake policies. I got to tell you, I work with a lot of students that they rely on those, and those that don't have study skills, they're like, I don't really care about this class anyway, and the teacher lets me retake the class, so I can just, do whatever I do on the test and then learn what I have to learn to then get the grade to pass the class. I see that a lot, unfortunately, when children don't love to learn. Okay, so if your kid's really counting on that makeup policy, like especially with like late work and missing work too, some teachers are so generous, some schools are so generous, you get like the whole quarter to turn in things, and that can just be a nightmare. So definitely see that. So why this happens, I gotta tell you, when it comes to thinking learning's unnecessary, is I like to pick on math teachers a little bit, but I would tell you our children that don't care about learning, they don't love to learn, they shut off their brains. All right. A lot of times what happens, especially in a math class, is they might get shown like the really detailed way to do a problem, like might take a couple classes, might be a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden the teacher's like, hey, here's the easy way, here's like the shortcut. But our teens that didn't really want to know how to do it in the first place, they're like, you already showed me, I already got this, I don't care. The other thing to think about, the other kind of concern here, is I mentioned Jenny's son Liam earlier, and he was not a math kid. Like that's what he thought. I'm just never going to be good at math. I'm always going to get D's. And so he thought, I don't need to spend any time attempting this class because it's not going to make any difference. But the opposite is also true. The reason I'm so excited, Sherry, when you reached out and said, hey, there's going to be parents of all ages here, is like we've got Erica here with a 9-year-old. I got to tell you that kids, they hit their wall at some point. Like I see it all the time. It could be 7th grade, it could be 12th grade, it could be like the last class of college, like no matter undergrad, whatever it might be. And then that teacher, that class, like something unexpected happens, and that child just doesn't know how to learn from that teacher, doesn't know how to understand that because he's never been taught study skills. And so I got to tell you, even if your child is doing really, really well now, you're not at all worried. I see it all the time that if these skills aren't in place, then that kind of that little bump becomes a huge mountain that could have never existed if these skills had been in place. And we didn't even have to think about, oh, how do I do this? Your child just knows these study skills because he knows how to learn.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing that I've seen. We have something called the Quest program in our district, so they're all have to test at the 1% level to get in, and those kids are pick up things really quickly. That's part of, the testing process, right? So they have in their identity, I'm smart. But when they
Mhm.
get to some classes that are harder, more difficult, and they don't have the study skills, all of a sudden they think they're not smart. And it's not that, it's just that they haven't learned these study skills. So even for those high achiever kids, like you're saying, they hit the wall. That's usually when I see that wall is hit, is when they come across a class that's harder than normal and
Mhm.
they don't have the skills to learn. And a lot of kids also, if they are going to an easier school and then they go to college with more difficult, same thing, they haven't learned how to learn, and then they get really distressed in college, feel like a failure. Many of them drop out. And as you said, that's a lot of money, a lot of money.
Exactly. And the thing too, you point out about the different schools. So with it being the early school year here, it's a question of how many of our listeners here have kiddos that have gone from elementary to middle school or middle school to high school. Because I had to look at the website and just I had to know how many schools were in the district, and my mind is blown. I mean, I went to a
A lot.
school, we had like two elementaries, we had one middle school, one high school. So it's just like, whoa, like it's
Yeah,
just so crazy. And
it's
so
big.
I just have to think about, okay, how different is each teacher? Like with so many teachers, like a kid might be going, I'm amazing at math, and he'll suddenly, wow, this teacher doesn't teach it the same way anyone else has. It's not that the teacher's wrong. It's not that that kid can't learn from that teacher or continue to learn math. It's just a way of adapting. And the question is, does that child know how to learn from any teacher or only in that one way? And we all have a preferred way of learning. So we just have to know what to do when someone doesn't teach in the way we want them to. Mhm. So my final thoughts on this when we're talking about studying being unnecessary and some of our kids feeling that way that they don't need to, the thing that worries me, kind of snowball effects here, would be they become lazy. All right, they're gonna become lazy at home, at school, at work. As technology advances, there's better ways of doing things. As their friends, their eventual coworkers, like they're learning different ways of doing things, maybe more efficient ways, easier ways, are kids that just don't want to learn. They just don't want to constantly improve for the sake of education. They're going to get left behind. And I think of them as know it alls too. I'm not sure about you, Sherry, let alone our other parents here. Know it alls, not my favorite people to be around. And I know we've mentioned a little bit about college, but one of the most important points whenever I teach this webinar is just making it very, very obvious that as soon as your child reaches graduation, as soon as they're done with all 12, 13, how many ever years at school it might be, they're expected to be ready to do whatever comes next. Is that a job? Is that school? Like whatever it might be, because the thought is your child, knows all the material he needs. She's learned all the skills she needs. She knows how to learn. That is just kind of the expectation after high school graduation. And so if your child doesn't have these skills by then, that next step is way more difficult
Yeah.
than it needs to be, because no one's ever going to pull your child aside and say, hey, this is what you should have learned. This is what really needs to happen to make this work. Okay. So my kind of fix to this, kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, is giving your kid a chance to prove it. Like it's amazing that you all have that Quest program. Like that's awesome that there's a way for kids that are more accelerated to kind of probably be more challenged. But there's going to be things that every one of your kids is good at. It might be like they're 3 years ahead in math, but yet they're struggling to be reading on grade level. Like that happens all the time. So how do we keep your kids motivated? How do we help your children actually want to learn and do well in every class? It comes down to giving them a chance to prove it. How can they show you, the teachers, whomever they need to, that, hey, I got this. Now keep me engaged by letting me do something else that, kind of keeps me awake. And I use that example of keeping awake because my cousin and I had a math class together in high school, and he slept all day, every class. I thought it was so unfair because literally the teacher would take a book, drop it on the floor next to him. My cousin would be like, whoa, what's going on? The teacher would ask him a question. He'd just rattle it off and then go straight back to sleep. So he got A's on all the tests because he just knew it. He never had to study. But because he never had to study, because everything just came to him, he dropped out of college for a semester. Like he literally failed out and had to realize, oh, I don't know how to do this because I've never had to know how to do it. So those are those 3 signs, those 3 kind of red flags that let you know that your children are missing study skills, that they don't know how to learn, which means they're not going to love to learn, because you can't love to learn if you don't know how to learn. So it boils down to that confusion, lack of focus, lack of motivation, and procrastination.
So leave this slide here for a second because I want to know from the parents who are here if there's one of these that kind of stands out on the both sides, I guess, like, but the confusion, lack of focus, lack of motivation, or procrastination. I'm not sure the ages of everybody's kids. Maybe you can put that in the chat box so we can see it. But procrastination, I think that's a really, really big one.
That's directly tied to motivation. Yeah, if we're not motivated, we're going to procrastinate. Yes, and if we get distracted, that's really just distracted to being procrastinating. Exactly. And if we don't really care about it, if we think we don't need to learn it, we're going to procrastinate then too.
Right.
That's why I had to go up there.
Yeah. Let's see. We've got someone is saying procrastination 10, 10, and 16. I assume that's the ages of your kids. So twins and a 16-year-old. Yep. Sounds about right. Especially when there's other distractions they really want to do instead.
Yes.
Yep.
I saw something earlier. Tarek had mentioned siblings are distraction, and I see that happen a lot too, especially if there's a big age difference. I see that. Yeah. So one kid seems to like be done with homework in 2 minutes, and the other child needs like 2 hours. Yeah, that could be a huge problem.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if we've got other parents that want to share. Sherry, if I should say my final thoughts here.
Lack of motivation. Someone else is saying. Yeah. Okay. And remember, if anybody has questions, feel free to put those into the Q&A box. We'll make sure we get those answered. All right. Go ahead, Jessyka.
All right. Awesome. Well, the final thing I just wanted to say is that I've been talking about study skills, but I haven't really shared with our listeners how I teach them. And so, like Sherry mentioned earlier, my program is called Love to Learn. There are 12 skills. So I know we haven't really had a chance to talk about those. I'm happy to bring them up in Q&A if it's a matter of how I teach them or what exactly this looks like in a session, but it's everything on the screen. Everything from note-taking to goal setting to confidence, grit, and resilience. These are all in my program, and I do teach them in this order. So I know sometimes parents are like, why do you start with note-taking? And I gotta tell you, it's the absolute most important study skill. Like I spent this whole time with everybody talking about note-taking, and I gotta tell you that to me, that starts in middle school. All right, one of my kind of rules of thumb, and I don't know, sometimes students are like, Jessyka, really? is I want students to take notes every day, every class. And so I'm happy to talk more about that, Sherry, if you've got questions or if our listeners do, but definitely do know those are the skills. I teach them over the course of 7 months. So it's 2 lessons per skill is how I do that. And like we mentioned earlier, it is virtual is how I do it. So that way I can record the lessons. That's part of the reason I don't really.
And that's 1-to-1, right? That's not a group?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I offer both that I'm happy to talk about with parents in a consultation. That usually kind of comes to question of what's the best fit. I got to tell you, I'm very, very biased. I absolutely love the one-on-ones just because I get to actually know the child I'm working with. You know, it's a matter of, okay, I don't have to try to remember, you know, I've got 4 visual kiddos and 1 kinesthetic. It's like, oh, we talk all about kinesthetic, all about, you know, whatever sport or activity or thing that's you, instead of trying to make everybody happy while we're also teaching the skills.
True. And also it makes sure, since it's virtual, that they're not distracted.
That is true. And it's just so much more convenient too. There's no, oh my goodness, we have to get there at this point, or I'm driving here and driving here. I mean, especially when we're talking about the school pickup lines. Like I watch all the videos, I watch all the memes, and I'm just like, okay. I know some of you guys are like living that every day, and I'm just glad it's not me. I just like, I can't imagine.
Let's go. Can you go back to the previous slide that has kind of all of the things listed there?
Definitely. Yes. And
so what I would love to know from everyone here is, looking at these, which one do you think kind of is the biggest issue, I guess, for your kids? Like if you're like, okay, just teach me one of these things, teach my kids one of these things, which one would it be? And give me a second. I wanna look at this list for a second and think for myself what it might have been. Hmm. I think for me it would probably be time management, maybe. Someone else is saying motivation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And if you let us know which one you're most interested in, then Jessica can talk to that point a little bit.
That's good.
Motivation, someone else
Hmm.
says. So why don't we talk a little bit about that? When you're teaching them motivation, what is your like philosophies around that? Because you can't just say like it, just do it. Don't like love
That's
love to
true.
learn, right? If it was like we could wave a magic wand, that would be awesome, right?
Definitely, definitely. And before I do that, I don't want to forget, share. I was going to go ahead and share these links in the
Yes,
chat,
please.
just since we're talking about motivation, it's kind of a good turning point here, because the homework buster that I'm offering everybody, it's got the 5 tips to bust through homework objections, and it's interactive, and so it really kind of it's for the parents to do with their teens. And I go
Oh, wow.
through, yeah, and so I go through all 12 study skills. And so since motivation is one of those skills that I teach, I want to make sure that it's like, okay, I purposely put different stories of students I've worked with, and really what they were going through, what their parents were going through, and how we helped with that. So I got those links in there, and then
Okay,
the
great.
consultation is 100% free. So if we have any of our listeners that are like, I need to know more, because like Jessica, you just kind of like give me just a little bit, always happy to offer those. But the way I teach motivation, I call them reward systems. And I know sometimes parents get terrified. They're like, Jessica, I'm not buying my kid more stuff. Like, and that's not at all what I do. So I used to call it an if-then system, but then someone pointed out, well, if they do it, so then she's like, you should call it an after-then system. So it's really essentially the way I teach motivation is I help the kids figure out what motivates you. Like what is it that you can do for you? Because I know I'm not a parent coach, Sherry, so I know that's, I don't want to step in the shoes that I can't fill, but just the point of parents don't have to motivate their children. Like that's what I do. Like the whole
Mm,
point of my program is I want kids to become self-sufficient. I want them to love to learn for the sake of learning, because they're learning for them. And so like with motivation, it's all about internal motivation. So it's
yeah.
all about, okay, I don't expect mom or dad to buy the latest video game. You don't have to go take them to their favorite dinner just because they did their homework. Like there's nothing, like you don't have to do that. It's a matter of your kid really, really loves to read. Like you talked about creative kids. Some of my students would rather read than ever do any of their homework. And so we talk about it. It's like, okay, you have 2 pages you have to read for this class. You have this book you want to read. Well, how many pages do you need to read of your book that you want to read in order to then read this other book, this, that you have to read, that's actually an assignment. So
Mhm.
we try and talk about that balance. And so, I mean, I wish I could give more information away. I just can't give away the whole lesson,
Yeah.
but just knowing there's that fine balance, because
Yeah. That's
sometimes
great.
sometimes teens love to, say, well, I deserve an hour break. And I ask them, I'm like, well, how long, like you said, did that assignment take? Well, it took me 5 minutes. Your child does not need an hour break after a
Right.
5 minute assignment. But yet, if they spend an hour doing class stuff, maybe, and if it's class stuff they hated, well, then yeah, your kid probably does need a break. And that's something I know sometimes parents have trouble with. They're like, they just got to work until it's done. And it's like, no, well, you gotta give them that reward of taking that break.
Yeah, and also, I'm sure you know this, that when you're learning a lot of things, your brain needs that downtime, even if it's 5 minutes, to process it and to create the neural connections. If you just keep loading it up, it loses a lot of it. So it's great to have that break in there. The other thing I will say that you mentioned this external validation versus internal validation. There is an issue when all of the validation and motivation comes from parents or teachers because they're not always going to have that. And I work with sometimes kids, young adults as old as like 22, 23, when they're getting into the workforce. And when they've been motivated by external validation, external motivation, it's their GPA or they're getting awards or, getting paid for grades. When they hit the workplace, it's a really depressing arena for them because they don't have that external validation that you did a really good job. They don't, maybe they're in a job where they get raises and promotions or whatever, bonuses. But typically, when you're starting out, you don't get a gold medal for turning in your report on time. And
No.
so, if we could start this internal validation, I'm proud of myself because I did that really difficult report for work. That's why this is important. Other than just getting good grades, that's why we got to do this.
Exactly. And something that I wanted to share that I usually share with my students, because Sherry, when you're mentioning the idea of processing, I always think about there's this graph and I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But it's just literally like the effort over time, just like literally like how much you retain. I should probably say more than effort, but just literally the way one of the things I teach is that you don't want to spend like more than 30 minutes. Like generally my rule of thumb is like an hour per study session. Like that's the absolute max. And it's always about, yeah, your kid starts up here and by like the hour mark, he's all the way down here. Like how much has he really learned?
Yeah.
That if we take that break and we start over, well, now all of a sudden we're getting the most out of it that we can. So that's to me another motivation piece is if I get a break, I know I get to start again. Okay, I know I'm going to feel better while I'm starting at the beginning again.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Yeah. And many times as parents we're like, just power through it, get it done. Like don't get up. And yeah, it's kind of, I understand that, but it's not the best way to do it. All right, let's go back to your list and let's cover
Oh,
one
yes.
more before we end tonight.
Sure. We got plenty of time.
Let's see. Does anybody else have one? If not, that they want Jessica to go through. If not, I'll choose one, or Jessica, you can choose one of your favorites. You can do
Sure.
that too.
Definitely. I'm trying to think. I know we talked about distractions earlier. We talked about procrastination, and that to me is all tied into time management.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that's something maybe we want to talk about. I know that's something that I feel like a lot of the teens I work with are like, yeah, that's the thing I need the most help with.
Yeah. Why don't we let's talk about soft skills. Like, what do you mean by that when it comes to studying? Because when I think of soft skills, I think of like shaking hands, being able to eye contact, those kinds of things. Like, what is it in this context?
I love that question. I gotta tell you, when I first put my program together, there were 9 skills. And before I officially, do like my beta launch, and before I started working with students, I asked a bunch of educators, I'm like, what are the skills that I'm forgetting? What is it that you want teens in the classroom to have? And soft skills was the unanimous answer. And I was like, oh, because I thought the same thing. I was like, well, yeah, they need them for after school. But for me, the way I usually teach it in the classroom is I let students know that your classroom is like a little mini workforce. The teacher is like
Mm,
your shift supervisor, like your immediate boss, like the everybody between the teacher and like the principal might be like a department head. Whereas like the principal is kind of like the franchise owner or maybe like the owner of the business. And then the superintendent is kind of like the corporate boss, the president of the whole organization. And so just letting them know that how you treat customers someday, like we talk about customer service is one of the soft skills. We talk about how you can't yell at a customer. So we talk a lot about de-escalating, and that's just like if you're working in a group with someone that you can't stand, or like if you have
yeah.
someone like sitting next to you you just don't like we talk a lot about how those skills that you use in the classroom are going to be the same skills you need at that first job. Because I know teens, they might have like a retail job, a fast food job, it's usually like their first job. Even something like babysitting or dog walking, like those to me also require soft skills. And so I purposely choose actually 5 soft skills that they need in the classroom now, first jobs. And then we start talking about resumes. We start talking
Mm,
about what those interviews look like, because we might have kiddo parents here that are like, my kid's not even middle school, why are we even thinking about interviews? But I gotta tell you, we're talking scholarship interviews, we're talking about college interviews, we're talking about, like we just said, dog walking, babysitting. Like, you don't just show up and say, I'm gonna help your dog or gonna take care of your house while you're gone. Like there has to be some, like you said, a handshake, like even something as simple as smiling. Like that's a
mm.
part of soft skills. So I don't know, Sherry, if that answers your question or if I went off on a tangent there.
Yeah,
But
it does, and it really got me thinking. I'm glad I asked about this one, because it does relate to the classroom in that how you treat your teacher, for instance. I mean, teachers, admit it or not, there's some subjective grading, you know? And if you know that a student's trying really hard to learn, your grading may be a little bit softer on that kid. And how do you show that you're really trying? You are able to talk to the teacher. You're able to act like you're interested. You can ask a question appropriately. So all of those things, I'm thankful that again that I asked this, because yeah, that definitely can affect just not just the grades, but also your experience of being in school,
Yes,
which affects your motivation, all of that stuff as well.
definitely. Yes. Oh, yeah. And I gotta tell you, yeah, that there's a there's a lot of eye contact that doesn't happen anymore either. And I've learned that
Right.
that's a lot of the whole COVID thing happening. But then just because so much stuff is online, that I've had so many parents tell me after I've worked with their teens, they're like, my kid actually looks at me, like actually talks to people now, like you never would have talked to adults. So I can't believe she actually talked to you.
Yeah,
And it's like, well, we just got to get them more comfortable and let them know that, yeah, this is how you talk to someone. This is how a conversation works in real life. Yes.
exactly. Exactly. It's awesome. All right. Okay. So we did a really good job of keeping on time, and we want to respect everybody else's time. So before we jump off, I would love to have everybody give Jessyka a reaction to say thanks for being here, but also put in the chat box something that you're going to walk away with tonight, something maybe you hadn't thought about. For me, it would be the soft skills, I think. So let's just, put stuff in there, because when we type it in there, by the way, it's going to be in a different part of your brain and you will be more likely to remember it. So, all right, I am going to share our in slide. I'm going to replace your share in a second. Da-da-da. And Jessyka, if you can check the chat while I'm doing this, that would be great.
Definitely.
Make sure we
Mhm.
don't miss anything.
Can do that. Make sure there's no questions. Yeah, sometimes they sneak in.
Awesome. Okay. All right, everybody. I really appreciate you, Jessyka, being here tonight. Very, very useful. And this is the perfect topic to start out the new school year. And so that kids are not overwhelmed and not stressed out, but they are getting the study skills they need. Parents, you can jump in and help your kids with that. But also feel free to reach out to Jessyka. She has that free download. She's got a Facebook group, I think, also. And of course, if you feel like your kid needs that support, reach out to her, and she will get back to you shortly. So thanks again, everyone. And we will see you next month, second Wednesday of the month, for our second parent chat of the season.